Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea continues to battle a third wave of COVID-19. More than 600 cases reported on Monday, with the health minister likening the situation to wartime. The local economy braces for the impact of the new strengthened distancing measures. The finance minister has expressed concern and is looking for ways to prop up the economy without face-to-face contact. And the South Korean government unveils the blueprint for its plans to make the country carbon neutral by 2050. This will include a national fund and new taxes. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea continues to see new cases of COVID-19 surpass 600 a day. The health minister is likening the situation to wartime and has warned that cases could soon rise to 1,000 a day. New distancing measures take effect from Tuesday to run through the next 3 weeks. Jaein reports.
South Korea recorded 615 new cases of COVID-19 on Monday. Most of those came from the capital region, with 422 from Seoul, Gyeonggi-do Province, and Incheon. Health Minister Bang Neung-hoo at a meeting on Monday said that even though fewer people were tested over the weekend, the number is still high. He stressed that the capital region is in a wartime situation and said that the daily caseload could reach over 1,000 in about a week or two. Starting on Tuesday, strengthened nationwide distancing measures will be applied for 3 weeks. The capital region will be under level 2.5, which will ban gatherings of more than 50 people. It also means that 130,000 businesses will be shut across the capital area and 460,000 businesses will have limited operations. Bars, singing rooms, and indoor sports facilities are to be shut, while supermarkets, malls, and hair salons can only stay open until 9 p.m. The rest of the country will be at level 2. This means places like singing rooms and sports facilities can open until 9 p.m. and gatherings of up to 100 people will be allowed. The health minister warned that if the spread can't be stopped at this strengthened level, it could lead to an explosive increase in cases and crash the medical system. Jang Tae-hyun, Arirang News.
President Jaein has ordered the government to mobilize all of its available manpower to tracing cases of COVID-19. He said that the country needs to speed up its track and trace regime in order to curb the rapid surge of cases in the greater Seoul area. Here's the senior presidential secretary for public communication.
The president has ordered the government to mobilize all available labor to step up tracing capacity in the capital area. For starters, civil servants, the military and police will be deployed to support efforts starting this week.
President Moon has ordered COVID-19 testing facilities to expand their operations during the evenings and weekends. He's also asked the public to get tested if they suspect they have the virus, even if they don't have symptoms. Separately, in a meeting with his top aides on Monday, Moon said he is sorry for not being able to curb the number of COVID-19 cases despite the enhanced antivirus measures. He stressed that cooperation from everyone is essential. The U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Stephen Biegun will be in Seoul from Tuesday until Friday for talks with South Korean officials on bilateral and regional issues. On Wednesday, Biegun will meet with his South Korean counterparts Choi Jung-gun and Lee Do-hun. Then on Friday, he'll meet with Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa. This will likely be Biegun's last trip to South Korea as Deputy Secretary, so they're expected to discuss how to maintain stability on the Korean peninsula during a change of administrations in the U.S. South Korea is battling its third wave of COVID-19 and will be imposing strict new rules from tomorrow. The last two waves caused significant damage to the economy, but this wave could be even bigger. If it's not contained, early next year could see an economic crisis. Paeunji reports.
With South Korea's capital area under level 2.5 social distancing measures, many small businesses are being hit hard as they have to shut after 9 p.m. Restaurants cannot have people eat inside after 9 p.m., and singing rooms and indoor sports facilities have to shut down regardless of the time of day for 3 weeks. Speaking to a local news outlet, the Minister of Economy and Finance, Hong Nam-gi, said that he is very much concerned about the domestic economy due to the strict quarantine measures. He added that the government is trying to come up with ways to boost the economy with measures that do not require face-to-face contact. According to the Bank of Korea, the private consumption rate was minus 4.8% in the first quarter of this year, when the first wave of COVID-19 hit the country. And during the second wave of the pandemic in the third quarter, private consumption also dropped to minus 4.4%. With stricter social distancing measures imposed over the country's capital city, industry watchers say the domestic economy is likely to be hit even harder, and that an economic crisis is expected in the first quarter of next year, if the spread of COVID-19 is not contained.
If more businesses allow employees to choose when to come to work and maybe allow them to work on weekends instead of weekdays, this could help in boosting economic activities.
Last October, when the government imposed level 1 social distancing measures, the nation saw a drop in retail sales compared to the same month the previous year, and the figures compared to the previous month as well. Biegun, Arirang News.
In other news, the South Korean government has laid out its blueprint to make the country carbon neutral by 2050. Related ministries held a briefing on Monday announcing the plan, which will involve the setting up of a national fund and new taxation systems. Ji-young has the details.
Under its pledge to go carbon neutral by 2050, the South Korean government plans to establish a fund to pay for the changes to the economy, and it'll overhaul the taxation system regarding carbon and greenhouse gas emissions to finance the fund. It plans to introduce a tax and levy system which puts a price on carbon emissions.
Carbon taxes will be introduced after comprehensively reviewing various factors, including climate change, income distribution, inflation, and industrial competitiveness.
Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi announced the plans after a ministerial meeting on Monday.
The government came up with 3 policy directions under the plan, which are scaling down dependence on carbon in all economic sectors, creating a low-carbon industrial ecosystem, and minimizing any disadvantages generated during the transition. The government will also work to strengthen the groundwork for implementing these policies.
The government will reduce the country's reliance on industries containing large carbon emitters, including steel and petrochemicals. It'll encourage high carbon emitting industries to transform their portfolios so that they're more focused on low carbon businesses. And it'll support those industries to minimize any fallout suffered by workers and companies during the transition period. The government also plans to develop new growth engines by nurturing promising eco-friendly industries, including electric and hydrogen cars and rechargeable batteries. EV charging stations are to be installed for 20 million households nationwide, and the use of green hydrogen is to be expanded by up to 80% by 2050. Ji-young, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news on this Monday. And for that, I'm joined on the line by Dr. Yang Jun-seok, Professor of Economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Yang, thank you for coming on today.
Happy to be here.
Well, stocks on Wall Street closed higher last Friday. All 3 main indices, the S&P by almost 0.9%, the Nasdaq by 0.7. Asian markets mostly down today. What's the story in the global markets?
Okay, well, as you mentioned, all 3 major U.S. indices, Dow, S&P, and Nasdaq, had intraday and closing record highs on Friday. They continued rising all through last week. What's a bit surprising is that they continue to rise even though the U.S. employment report issued on Thursday was quite disappointing. U.S. only added 245,000 jobs, even though the consensus estimate before the employment report was released was that U.S. would add 440,000 jobs. So the job addition numbers were actually very disappointing. But as usual with stock market in recent years, it seems that bad news is good news because the stock investors seem to have interpreted the low job additions as meaning that now the Congress has to pass a stimulus bill. Now, the U.S. President-elect Biden has stated that he would increase stimulus once he gets into the office, but that's in mid-January. He wants Congress to pass at least some stimulus bill before he takes office. And right now, the amount that's being negotiated between the Democrats and the Republicans is about $1 trillion. Republicans want less. The Democrats want more. But even this is a step down from the negotiations they had before the U.S. presidential elections in November, when they were arguing whether the stimulus bill should be $1 trillion or $2 trillion. But still, the market is taking this bad news apparently as good news, and stock market is continuing to rise higher than ever. Europe. The last week, most European indices had a good week. FTSE, French CAC rose, but German DAX fell. FTSE rising is somewhat surprising because, well, they're heading toward the end of Brexit transition, and right now it looks like Britain will leave the European Union without a trade agreement. That means in January they will have to pay and impose tariffs on European goods, and it's widely expected to be a crash, but still the stock market doesn't seem to be reflecting it at the moment. The Asian market, well, Nikkei fell last week. It fell slightly today. The Chinese indices, Shanghai went slightly down at the end of last week. It fell again today by 0.81%. Hang Seng, the Hong Kong index, it rose late last week, but it fell today, and right now it's about the level that it was last Tuesday, so it wiped out most of last week's gains.
And in Korea today, the Kospi started out higher, then there was a big dip mid-morning, but in the end it was up. The Kosdaq also higher. Tell us about the local markets.
Okay, well, Kospi ended at 2745.31, so it went up by 0.5% today. This was the highest closing level for fourth day in a row. Individuals bought, institutions and foreigners sold, and this is being attributed to optimism over the U.S. stimulus. Now, for November, Kospi rose 3%. That's highest among G20 country stock markets. Dow rose 6.7%, Nikkei 10%, and Shanghai 4%. Kospi was the highest of the bunch. Year-to-date returns, the Kospi recorded 24.3%. That's second after Argentina, which recorded 31.3%. So the market capitalization for the Kospi index is now about 1,877 trillion won. That's about 95% of 2019's Korean GDP. Now, this is U.S. standards, but on a whole, if the market capitalization of the stock market is greater than the GDP, then it's usually thought of as being somewhat overvalued. And this is when you account for all the stocks in the stock market. But right now for Korea, they're just taking the Kospi stocks. It's about 95% of the GDP, the total market capitalization. So again, that seems to be a evidence that at least slightly the stock markets are overvalued. Kosdaq was upward today. It went up by 1.45%. Individuals and institutions sold and foreigners bought.
Well, it's the start of a new week, Professor. We're almost out of time, but what's on your radar this week?
Okay, well, the BOK monetary and credit policy report is coming up, and the government is issuing reports on budget deficits. National Statistics Office has Korean social indicators for 2020, and KDI just put out an economic outlook saying that the economy seems to have made a downturn since the late November. For the foreign data, U.S. employment and consumer price indices are coming up. European Central Bank monetary policy report and interest rate decisions are coming up. And again, Brexit transition is coming to an end. But right now, the United Kingdom, England does not seem to be ready. So I think that's going to be bigger and bigger news as we approach the end of the year.
All right, we'll be watching that, and we'll catch up later in the week. Professor, thank you for sharing your insights today.
Thank you.
With Christmas around the corner, South Korea is holding a nationwide sales event from December 19th to the 27th. More than 12,000 small business owners and 2,500 local supermarkets will take part in this 2020 Christmas market, mainly online and through non-contact platforms due to COVID-19. On the Naver, Kakao, and Tmon platforms, there'll be discounts of up to 50%. These platforms will link to live home shopping shows hosted at traditional markets to further boost consumption. New data show that South Koreans reached their peak earnings at the age of 45. That's according to Statistics Korea, which says that in 2017, the average income of a 45-year-old was around $31,000. The data showed that South Koreans on average make more than they spend between the ages of 28 and 58. But from age 59, spending starts to outpace earnings due to healthcare costs. Also, in 2017, taxes paid by the working-age population amounted to roughly $116 billion. And in the sign of Korea's aging population, a little over half of that amount was spent on senior citizens through the national health care and pension systems. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.